Hey, what's going on? What's up? I know it's been a while. I'm IcyRhythms, and this is my review for Wolfenstein: The New Order.
Let me tell you how this is gonna work. I'm gonna ask you one question. You are gonna answer that question in a way I find satisfactory, and if you do not, I will saw your head off with this here appliance, you hear me? So here it comes.
What is there to say about the visuals in The New Order? It's a game that released in 2014, and I think it still looks pretty damn good. I don't think they were going for a hyper-realistic look here, and using id Tech 5, it made for some interesting art choices in this game, and because of that, I think because it used a dated version of that engine, I think it really works for this game. And I still love the look of the game for the most part, but being that it is id Tech 5, there are some drawbacks. Most of the game, most of the time still looks fantastic, and in some ways I prefer it over a lot of other FPS games that have released this generation. It's just that this version of the engine never really looked that special, obviously, far less capable than id Tech 6, and also now we've seen id Tech 7 with games like Doom Eternal. Things like, I guess an example would be, if you turn the camera too quickly, you can see the textures on many objects in the environment popping in. Machine Games, I feel, also got a little lazy with this release. It is my opinion, because the attention to detail in the environments is pretty average in this game, and that's me being nice. Just walking up to a table, for example, to pick something up or just to look at something on the table really shows the limitations of id Tech 5, or their laziness, or both. Some of that stuff just looks really, really blurry. If you're willing to take New Order for what it is, first of all, a great first-person shooter, then, we can say the character models look great, some of the environments have extremely well done art, the lighting can still look decent in some areas, and the cutscene stuff looks really, really solid. It's just, for me, it's hard to get that out of my head that Doom and New Colossus both use id Tech 6 and make New Order's cutscenes seem a little underwhelming at times. If you look at a game like The Evil Within 2, which both have heavily modified versions of this engine, completely different genre, of course, but even compared to those games, The New Order seems a lot less impressive with its visuals. All in all, again, I still think it can look great, and there's one or two moments in the game that'll probably have you saying, I don't know what this Icy dude was talking about. This game looks awesome. And you'd be right. The New Order probably won't blow you away in 2020 visually, but I still think it can look fantastic. It's 2020. As with a lot of other generations, there have been a lot of first-person shooters released. I can't speak to the greatness I've heard about from games like Titanfall 2, but three of my favorite in particular from this generation are all still awesome: Killing Floor, Doom, and now Wolfenstein. And 6 years later, not many games are this cool or this fun to play. This game revolves around 2 or 3 different elements in order for you to do well. Run and gun, high, fast-paced action with, in my opinion, some unfortunate areas that more or less want you to slow down everything you were doing a minute ago for some stealth. I don't necessarily have a huge problem with this, other than things you've heard me talk about in other reviews. So many games have stealth elements these days, and in my opinion, it can come off as more of a crutch when a developer can't figure out how to make the gameplay feel fresh throughout the entire experience. And I'm not even saying the stealth is bad in New Order, because it isn't. It's actually pretty good. Seeing all of the different takedowns depending on how many knives you have out at that time is pretty awesome. It's very brutal. It's just cool to see some really nice animation work like that. I just don't think that many want to play a classic series like Wolfenstein in this way. That's just my opinion. I know that's not how I want to play, and you don't have to play stealth. You can go through every area and shoot everything and everyone up, but it almost feels like they want to force you into these situations where you must be careful. You have to be quiet, and I'm not feeling that. You know, it's a knock on the game, but not necessarily anything, again, I'm going to knock some points off for. It's almost like Rockstar suddenly deciding to put a ton of puzzles in GTA, or Naughty Dog deciding Uncharted should have real-time strategy elements or something. It's like, I guess this works, but it's not the reason I've come to play. Again, not a big knock on the game, but a knock nonetheless. Thankfully, I'm here to tell you, when you do actually run and gun and you're able to shoot things, Wolfenstein: The New Order is one of the best games this generation. A lot of that comes from the weapon variety and the pretty consistent change in location, that moment-to-moment gameplay that can be so over the top that it puts a smile on your face. One minute you're shooting your basic video game fodder in a castle, the next you're maybe stabbing a dog in the back. Yes, you do kill dogs in this game. I know. It's a huge deal, right? Actually, no, it's not. We've been killing dogs in games for quite some time now. I don't understand the big deal, but depending on when you watch this video, it's once again a huge topic of conversation due to a game called The Last of Us 2. And then later, you can shoot some lasers on the moon. Come on, man, lasers on the damn moon. This game's awesome. Anyone saying that doesn't sound like fun, I don't even want to know what your idea of video game fun is. But once you're doing all of this and you see the devastation that you can cause on screen, you're just in it, and the game becomes even more awesome. Of course, some of my praise and excitement may have been lowered a bit if it had not been for the awesome gore this game has. You spend 90% of the combat time exploding bodies and shooting them to pieces. If there had been more of that and a lot less stealth, I don't think you would have seen a lot of people complaining and saying some of the things that many were saying when this game originally released. At the time, some also found New Order a bit of an inconvenience, or maybe a little bit of a chore, because it's a little old and a little new in terms of how you play some of this game. In the heat of a battle, for example, you got 10, 15 enemies on screen, you're going to have to find ways to get more ammo, health, and armor for BJ, and the way that you do that is to pick each and every one of those things up. So, one by one, you're going to have to pick up all this new armor, all of this new ammo, and health for BJ. That's just how this game is played, and that's why I think for some, having to pick all that up as opposed to just walking over top of it or being really close to it. Some people are looking for that new in a game. And when you play something like this that sometimes feels new and modern, and at other times you're like, what the hell is this? Some gamers, they're not used to that. They're used to modern game design and how a lot of those things work. But that's the reality of this game. And whether you're playing on normal or hard, you may struggle because enemies often don't miss in this game and do a lot of damage very quickly. I love that. I still like to be challenged every now and then in games. This stage of my life, I don't always want everything handed to me, and games like this can give you that old school feel while again feeling somewhat modern at times. I want to feel like I earned wiping the floor with this group of enemies and not be forced into some quick time event where I pushed E 5 times on my keyboard or hit square and R1 fast enough on my DualShock to take out 25 enemies in one go. Sure, moments like that are always cool to look at, but that's not how I want to play my shooters. Another thing I'd point out is that if you've played the new Colossus and not the New Order, I would say that the New Order has better moment-to-moment gameplay. New Colossus isn't the only game guilty of it, but so many games fill up the playtime, especially early on, with cutscenes that very easily could have been done in game, or the developer could have gone the extra mile to tell the story through the gameplay in some of those moments. New Order does try hard to break up the constant shooting and stealth by having you follow what has become pretty much a common thing in video games. You can't progress this mission until you search the entire area for this tool, or hey, can you go and find this ring for me? It holds very sentimental value, so it's stuff like that. It's cool, I guess, but the New Order has one of the better Easter eggs of the generation, I'll say that, so that's worthy of some exploration. But some of this stuff isn't really what I want to be doing as a gamer in a game like Wolfenstein. Another thing I love about games like this is you don't take all of the enemies down the same way. Similar, sure, but the same way, absolutely not. You'll have to decide what weapons work best on one enemy versus a different enemy, and whether or not you need to wear down certain parts of their armor first before being able to completely take them out. Some of those weapons to choose from, obviously you have knives, you have grenades, there's an SMG, there's handguns, assault rifles, which are usually my go-to of choice. It's just really satisfying using these to blow enemies into chunks. Sniper rifles, there's a laser-like weapon, double-barreled shotguns, an auto shotty that eventually receives an upgrade that allows shells to bounce or ricochet off of walls or the floor. Now that shit is really fun. Most of the AI is kind of dead in the water in this game. Like a lot of other games in this genre, things can feel intense, but what you're left with is mostly made up of really stupid decisions by enemies. At one point in the game, I was able to cheese pretty easily walking back into the room before the one filled with tons of enemies and continue recharging one of my favorite weapons in the game. They did very little to stop me, and I'm hoping that's something that can change in games moving forward, or maybe even with this coming generation. Probably not, but it's something that I would like to see. Just a really big jump in AI, physics, and momentum, all of that, just think the little things that matter in games is something we don't see enough of. But AI is something that's needed to be worked on and improved for a very long time. Again, certainly not something I'm going to dock a lot of points for. Overall, the gameplay in Wolfenstein is what sells it. If you like first-person shooters and have yet to try one of these, look no further than something like this. The New Order has some of the best shooting mechanics and some of the best overall gameplay in the business when it's working and working well. And if you try it out, I don't think you're going to regret it.
This time, we get the job done. Now let's go. Let's move it on. Go.
Do you know how much misfortune you are in if you do not release me? There is no point in keeping me here.
Was hier vorgeht, die haben einem Offizier bei der Befehlsausführung
Unser Befehl lautet nicht, die Betreuer zu töten.
Was will der hier? Keine Ahnung.
The story in New Order breaks down into something very simple, and I think most can understand it. It's exactly what I want in a shooter, not tons and tons of fluff. While I do think at times it takes itself a little bit too seriously, that's not what I'm looking for in a game like this, but it doesn't really interrupt me too much as I enjoy the moment-to-moment gameplay. This game takes place in an alternate timeline where a certain group of scumbags, you'll find out who that is as you play, actually won World War II. You return as, of course, BJ Blazkowicz, certainly a favorite in the genre at this point, and, BJ is great in this game. They're definitely trying to flesh out his character a little bit more. Anya is great in this game. The voice acting is exceptional on all fronts, and the relationship that these two are trying to build while still trying to fight what seems is very much a losing battle is pretty powerful in this game. I felt that. I felt it was really well done, even though, this is a more cinematic, story-driven experience. I feel like we could have done without a lot of what you do see in this game. Some of it does feel a little filler and a little too serious for me at times. And again, don't get me wrong, some of this stuff is really, really awesome and very well done. Some of it can be very brutal even. There's one choice you're asked to make at the beginning of the game from the game's main villain, and they cut away from that and what took place during that moment. Well, later on, that same villain reminds you much later in the game what that was like, and I honestly felt bad for the character that it happened to, because that scene, you know, while it is a cutscene and you have no control in that moment, it's pretty exceptional. I wanted to turn my head away, even though I've seen worse in video games and in real life for that matter, but it just seemed so brutal, so harsh and unnecessary. But these people in this game are pretty ridiculous, and there's something else. That kind of stuff, as long as it doesn't happen often, is, again, pretty damn awesome, even if at times I find it a little hard to watch. So, you know, I'm not going to go into tons of spoilers like, you know, many of my reviews, but I do think the story in this is really, really good. They try to make you care about some of the other characters that aren't BJ and that aren't Anya, and it's just really hard for me to do that. I don't really care about most of these characters. It's not a knock on, you know, the developer or the writing or anything, even though I guess you could blame some of that stuff. It's just, I can't really care about some of these other characters, and I really wouldn't want to play a Wolfenstein game as anybody but BJ. So, you know, it's extremely well done. Games have come a long way with storytelling and how that storytelling is presented. So, yeah, top-notch voice acting for a game like this. What is mostly pretty well done with the writing, but not something that this game, you know, it's not going to be remembered as a game that told, you know, one of the best video game stories of all time. But what is here, and there is a lot here, there's some pretty deep stuff here, is interesting. It is interesting. I think Wolfenstein: The New Order is one of the best shooters I've ever played. I think I'd rather play it over Doom 2016, depending on my mood, because I do enjoy some things about it more. And I still think Doom 2016 is great, but if you also couple The New Order with its DLC, The Old Blood, that's where the comparison stops. I don't know if I'll ever review that, but you should damn sure play that as well. A few hiccups in the gameplay and a much more cinematic, story-driven experience that at times takes itself a little bit too seriously isn't exactly what I was hoping for, but the game is still loads of fun. There aren't many shooters that are better, and especially from this generation, not for me, not in my opinion. As it stands now, 2 or 3 shooters are better than The New Order, and considering how many we get each generation, that's saying something. I'd say the next game in the series needs to have visuals of the new Colossus. Obviously, they can improve that now with id Tech 7, and have a lot more time spent playing than these last couple of efforts. It should be far more over the top than the last couple of games as well. We're not even going to talk about that sister DLC from the new Colossus. We won't even get into that, but it needs to have a lot more playtime, no co-op nonsense, unless they feel it's something that can absolutely work. But just bring the single player back, make it over the top, you know, have like, you know, a total of 8 cutscenes the entire game, and make the next Wolfenstein something really special. So, no excuses, but I do give The New Order a 9 out of 10. Even after all this time, I still think it looks and plays pretty darn good. If you haven't played it, play it. It's one of the best FPS games to come this generation, and maybe, just maybe, all time. Thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate it. You guys have a good one. The next review shouldn't take nearly as long. It should be out within the next week or two. So, hoping for the best. You guys take care. Peace.